Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast, where we raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host, and I'm super excited to be with you today. If you want to follow us on all major platforms, look us up at Hello Kind Soul Podcast. And if you want to follow me, look me up at eGreen Equity. I hope you enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Welcome to Hello Kind Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Ebony Green. I'm super excited being in community with you today. The question I have for you today is, how do you take up space? How do you take up space in your life? How do you take up space in your relationships? How do you take up space in your career, right? What does that look like, feel like, and sound like? So I'm asking that question because I was having a conversation with someone and we were talking, and one of the things she said to me is like, Eb, like, why don't you take up space? Like, what is it about your experience in life that you try to fit yourself into places? And when she asked that question, I didn't really understand what she meant. But more importantly, I didn't understand what it meant for me. And what it made me think about is like, well, I don't like to take up space because I'm a big person. Like anybody who knows me my whole life, I'm tall, I have a larger build. And so for me, I've spent a lot of my life trying to make sure that I fit, right? That I don't stand out, that I'm not in the way, right? And so when she asked that question, what it made me start to really kind of go down this rabbit hole around is like, well, where are the places that I do take up space, right? So maybe my stature is bigger than most people. Like I've always had a heavier build, right? And so if I'm trying to always put myself in a smaller place, I wonder how that translates into my life. And so my question for you today is like, do you struggle to take up space, right? And at some point, someone said, take up space like water, right? And so when I asked that question to you, I really want you to think about like, where are the places in your life that you're able to comfortably fit and feel proud about the amount of space you're taking up, right? So here's what I learned from that question in terms of what I ended up thinking about is that because when I grew up, there are always these thoughts about being kind of in the way or taking up too much space because I'm a larger person. That thought process, mindset seeped into my psyche. And so I've spent a lot of time making sure I don't take up space, right? And so part of that, one place I didn't take up space was in my career, right? I'm always really mindful to like be out the way and not really bother folks and not say too much, not think too much, right? And that, I don't think that's been helpful. I think for us as people, if you're out there and you're struggling with how you take up space, it's like in your company, in the place that you work, do you speak the truth? Do you give critical feedback? Are you afraid to say the thing, the quiet part out loud, right? And like now there are places and spaces that I think we are more likely than not to know, like your opinion's not welcome, but I wonder how many times our opinion was welcome and we were uncomfortable saying it. And so for me, as I started to think about that, I was like, oh, wow, like I never really thought about that. Like there are these experiences, and I've said this multiple times, that happen all throughout your life. And they translate into manifesting, or they translate into being something now as an adult, right? And so this was just a great example of like, well, when you think about taking up space, we think about how it fills in a particular area, right? And because of life, our experiences, our circumstances, many of us in multiple different ways have been told to shrink, not to take up space, to know your place, to stay in the lane, right? To make sure that you fit in. But the question is like, what are you trying to fit into? Because when I think about the changes that I've been able to create in this world, typically I never fit in. I always walked outside the lines of what was like normal or conforming. Right. And then at some point it was like, well, I don't even want to conform. I want to break out and do these things and say these things and change the world in this way. But it required me to really think deeply about this idea of like, I don't want to take up space because I don't want to make other people uncomfortable because of my presence. Right. And so that's going to lead me to the next thought. Was part of what I started to realize was that there are people that you know, and I'm sure like who are the people in your life that when you interact with them, you're just like, wow, there's something about them. Right. And sometimes it's that they're brilliant, but most often it's the way that they engage with you. And when they engage with you, like you feel this feeling of like, they're dope. They're just dope people. And sometimes you say that because they're brilliant. And sometimes you say that's because how they make you feel. You're like, they're just an awesome person. And then the second question to that is like, when they do that, when you engage with those people, are you excited and motivated from those people, by those people to go do these things that change the world? Sometimes, right? Right. And the beauty of that is that those people leave you with a gift. What I would also say is those people are not always scared to take up space, but sometimes they are. Sometimes those people are able to communicate and engage in a way that really motivates and galvanizes people to be better people. And sometimes those people know in certain spaces, if you actually lead with who you are, it's a problem. But what I will posit to you is that people who are around you who struggle with your light, it's really about the fact that they haven't found theirs. And so you taking up space, and when I say take up space, let's like boil this and distill it down to you being authentically you. And so all of us have this brilliant light about us. I firmly believe that it might get dim as we go through life, and we may have the opportunity to reclaim it, right? If we get to this place of awareness of like, wait a minute, everybody in this world has something incredible to contribute, right? And so if we're able to keep our light bright, or as it gets dim, really get to the awareness of like, wait a minute, I don't have to dim my light for other people's comfort. And for those of you out there who understand the beauty of you, but struggle with like, why do some people not like me, even though I've never done anything to them? It's to understand that the issue is really sometimes with other people and not with you. That the things you do in this world are magical, beautiful, right? But there's also a place that there are multiple people, many people who struggle to really step into like their brilliance, really acknowledge and recognize who they are. And so they almost require you to not take up space. They require you to dim your life. They require you not to show up as your best self because it makes them uncomfortable. And so part of the reason I'm sharing this with you or even having this episode is because one of the things that I'm troubled by is in this world, looking at people, engaging with people, meeting people daily that are amazing humans. And sometimes those people are acting in ways that bring me pause, because they're so uncomfortable with their own light, they don't even know what to do with it. They don't even know where to shine it, right? And so I can talk with someone and walk away and have this amazing experience. And I can see that same person in another context or another circumstance or situation, and it's almost like two different people. And in my head, I'm like, what has happened? Because I know you didn't have enough time to change who you were. So why doesn't this person translate to this person? And I want to say that part of it is in our career, there are times people ask us not to take up space because your light is too bright. Now, I'm not saying, we just had recently there was the episode of Arrogance and Confidence. I'm not saying taking up space means I'm arrogant and I walk around being a fool. I'm saying taking up space is knowing who you are, recognizing the light that comes from within you, and using it in the way to heal and to create opportunities for people and to improve the world, right? And love on folks genuinely, authentically. But if you're not aware of how amazing you are, there are people that really don't know how to just be them. And so instead, they shrink and form what other people need them to be. And while those people can still be impactful, I will posit that they're not their best self. And that in some cases, they may not even be in the right place to do the things they're here to do because they're so hyper-focused on how the world outside sees them that they've learned to conform to the rules. And I'm not saying go break all the rules, but I break rules, but I'm not saying you should break the rules. What I'm saying is when you live your life, when you go into different experiences, do you shift or change who you are because you're trying to conform to who other people need you to be? Because that, to me, is how I did not take up space, right? And when I thought about what that really meant, it was like, well, yeah, because I've always tried to stay out the way and fit because I am so big. But what I then had to liken it to was like the enormity of the light, like, right? Like I am here to do something amazing, and so are you. And so to me, the physical shrinking, the physical fitting me into the small box in my thoughts was like, and that's what you do when you live in this world. That's what you do when you go into meetings. That's what you do when you engage with people, because you are super fixated on making sure you don't make other people uncomfortable. And those people that you're trying to not make uncomfortable, they haven't figured out and found their own light. And so your light irritates them. We are living in a world right now, in this particular moment, that we have a lot of work to do. And so I don't actually think we have the fortunate pleasure of kind of not figuring it out. I'm thinking there is no greater time in the history of this world that all of us have to realize that it is okay to take up space. It is okay to be big, right? And I'm saying that because the work that has to happen requires everyone to be who they're supposed to be. And so there's no option for you to say, I'm going to continue to play small because I'm worried about what that means for other people, right? And so that was the first thought. And then even when I thought about like, well, what does it mean to take up space in relationships, right? Friendships, intimate relationships, otherwise, it means that we actually say the things we think when we really get to engage, right? There's these moments in my life that I think about how many conversations I've had with people that I didn't articulate what I actually knew I wanted to say. Because if you asked me a question or if I was communicating in a certain way, I was so worried about if the person I was talking to would take what I said seriously, if the person I talked to would be okay with what I thought. And what I've come to realize is that even in the moments that people I have deep relationships don't necessarily like what I say or don't necessarily know what to do with what I say. And this is all like about respectful discourse, right? So let's preface it. Like, I'm not talking about being wild and running off at your mouth and harming people. That's not even me. And that I don't co-sign or think's okay. I'm saying when you're having a conversation with people and they're asking you for your opinion, or you see something wrong and you say, okay, I'm going to address it and have this conversation with this person, taking up space in my head in that context is like saying the truth, giving critical feedback, saying the thing that you think matters, right? And so for a lot of people, they'll ask you questions. And then when you tell them what you think, they're mad that you had the audacity to tell them the truth. And what I've always said to them is like, do you want me to tell you the truth? And I sometimes start conversations like that. Like I'll say like, okay, you're asking me for this, but do you want me to tell you the truth? Or would you prefer me to like have that conversation another time? So I really want you folks to just really kind of fall into that thought process of like, well, how do you take up space and where are the places where you don't take up space? And if you don't take up space, why don't you take up space? When it comes to relationships or the way I communicated, I never wanted to take up space because I was always worried about what will be the perception when I say what I say. And for a lot of people who are in relationships and people say like, hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, I'm thinking about that. If you're not speaking the truth or your truth, why are you not saying it? What is stopping you from doing that? Do you think people aren't going to listen to you? Do you think what you have to say isn't important? Do you think what you have to say won't be received? Do you think what you have to say will hurt people's feelings? Do you think what you have to say will bother people? And if so, then is there a way to change the way you interact or communicate so that what you say can be said in a compassionate way so folks still feel that they have their dignity and their humanity attacked after you leave that conversation? Because all of us know that there are times you have to have very serious conversations with people you care about. And if you're not able to take up space in that context and speak from your heart about things that matter deeply to you, whether it's how a relationship's going or whether it is what you need or why you need what you need or what you're not going to do or what you are going to do, the question is then you're in these relationships, friendships or otherwise, and you're just not happy in them because you're scared to take up space. But here's what I've learned before, that when I'm scared to take up space and I don't say the things that matter, I tend to end up in the same place later. And it's a problem. And so I want you to take up space and I want you to be really intentional about how you take up space. That I can be in my fullness version of me and still be really respectful and caring to everyone else outside me. Like that's a given, right? And then the other place that we should think about is how do you take up space for yourself? How do you care deeply about who you are and how you're becoming? Do you even care about who you are and how you're becoming? The average person that I speak to that says like, oh yeah, I don't do any of these things to care for myself, but I do all of them for other people. It makes me think about, well, why don't you care about you? Because taking up space also for me reminds me of like, how do I take up space and prioritize my wellness, my being, my mental, emotional, and physical safety and wellness? Because some of us have been taught that if you care about you, it's selfish for everyone else. And that's not really true, right? We know that's not really true. What I know for sure is that when I take up space with how I'm taking care of me and I prioritize myself, right? Taking up space to me equals prioritizing yourself as one of the things that really matter in your life, then I get to enter into relationship and community and conversations and my career feeling a lot better, feeling good inside my body. And that's the best version of me that then can expand to be creative, innovative, all the things we're looking for from employees, from people, from partners, all the things, right? And so if you're scared to do this thing called taking up space, what's at stake? What do you compromise? What are you giving up? And what is the outcome of those things for you? So the reason I feel like it's really important to have this conversation is that I'm still chewing on what does it mean to take up space? And I'm thinking about it, and and the last month or so of my behavior has shifted a little bit. Like, I'm no longer willing to squish myself for the comfort of other people. Like, that's just not something I'm willing to do. I'm not willing to do that, and I'm hyper vigilant in the way that I communicate with people so that I don't cause harm or recreate harm for people, right? And so to me, it's not an if or, it's a both and. I don't have to squish myself and be around people who are offended by my light, because I'm here and aware that there are people in this world waiting for me to get to the place, to do the thing, to build the thing. I've said this before, to change the world. And so I can't risk the lives I'm going to impact because someone else needs me to be small because they're not willing to do the work to find their light or to shine their light. And I'm willing to communicate that to people in a very respectful, compassionate way. And hopefully the way I'm able to interact with people and share that point with them is helpful for them to find their light. 2, I'm going to encourage other people to do so, because the most amazing experiences I've had in the last 3 months have been the blessing and opportunity to just break bread and be in community with people who are very aware of what they're trying to do in this world. And not everybody understands the assignment, but they're certainly willing to explore and be curious about that assignment to figure it out. And that really matters because, as I said, we are at a critical inflection point in this country, in our lives, in the history of this world. And so it is really essential that all of us begin to really be introspective and quiet and silent and think about, what am I going to do with the rest of my life here? How can I be in service of others? How can I be in support of others, right? And the third thing for me is, like, I'm going to encourage people who struggle in finding their light to do some work around what does taking up space look like for you so that you can be your best version. Because the other sad thing that I've been very aware of, and it's come to its kind of tipping point the last 3 months, 4 months of seeing people kind of show up as themselves, is the level of harm that people are creating who are scared of the light. And so I'll share that for the people in the back. The level of harm that people are creating who are scared of their light, who are scared of actually being authentic. And so they're showing up as this person that just kind of vomits their pain and trauma on other people and hurts other people, because that to them is them being performative, that they haven't figured it out and they know all the stuff. You don't know all the things. Whoever is watching this, let me be very clear. Respectfully, you don't know everything. And I hope that hurt your feelings if you thought it did, if you thought you did, because you don't. The one thing I've learned every year I've gotten older in this world is how much I don't know, how much I don't understand, how much is left to learn. And so if there's someone out there, listen, I'm going to encourage you, if there's someone out there who actually believes that they know everything and they don't need critical feedback, they don't need people to inform their process. Like, listen, there's a phrase that someone has told me, and I'm smiling because she continues to say it. If you are that person, the emperor has no clothes. Full stop. You are running around thinking you're something you're not. And I promise you, on the other side of that awareness and the other side of you kind of slowing down is there's more of our version of you that will create even more change, but you'll create more change honoring community and servant leadership and loving people and yourself authentically. And that will create far more change than what you can imagine running around, not allowing other people to inform some of your process. And I'm going to leave you with the last piece, which I think really talks about this podcast, listening to other people, being open, having a student disposition is one of the ways that I take up space. Is I humble myself in understanding that I am never to evaluate the messenger. I'm just to evaluate the message. That there are people, the person who I talked with who asked me that question, Ed, why don't you take up space? That person's question genuinely helped me to understand a deep piece of how I was moving in this world, how I was operating, how I was scared to really step into who I'm here to be. But had I evaluated the messenger, I would have never understood the message. So I'm going to leave you with, how do you evaluate the messages that come to you by the messengers that show up with them? And do you have enough humility in your heart to listen to those people, if only to then process that information and decide what's for me and what's for not? what's not for me. Because I promise you, if we spend more time evaluating the message as opposed to the messenger, it will help us figure out a way to indeed take up space, indeed be our best self, and most importantly, continue to change the world in a way that the next generations get to inherit, and that comes to them with their humanity intact and their dignity intact, and that everyone who gets to show up gets to authentically be them and to love on each other, because collectively our job is to forge forward into a world that continues to give opportunity. I hope you have an amazing week, kind soul. I just want to know, how do you take up space? And if you're not taking up space, listen, you need to figure it out. Take time to figure out the root of that, and then understand that there are people in this world waiting for you to learn that you are beautiful by yourself, right? You're imperfectly perfect, and nothing will serve the world better than you finding your kindest, most gentlest, loving self. Talk to you soon, kind soul. Take care.